I said, "Move, Gramps. This ain't a homeless shelter." The security guard's hand was already on the old man's shoulder when the metal caught the light. Marcus Webb, 73 years old, sat in the front seat of the crosstown bus, his weathered hands gripping a faded duffel bag. His clothes were clean but worn, a jacket with patches at the elbows, pants that had seen better decades. His shoes, though polished with care, were splitting at the seams. The other passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others pulled out their phones. "Sir, I paid my fare," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the grip tightening on his shoulder. The security guard, Brad Mitchell, 28, with a freshly pressed uniform and an even fresher attitude, sneered. "Yeah? Show me your transfer then. Or your pass. You got 3 seconds before I call the real cops." Marcus reached slowly into his jacket pocket. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from the cold that lived in his bones now, the kind that never quite left after too many nights in the Korean frost. "I have my. Time's up." Brad yanked Marcus toward the aisle. The old man stumbled, his bag falling open. Contents spilled across the floor. A Bible with a cracked spine, a photograph in a plastic sleeve, a small American flag folded into a triangle, and something else that clattered against the metal floor. The metal. It spun once, twice, then settled face up under the fluorescent lights. Brad didn't see it. He was too busy shoving Marcus toward the door. "Let's go, old man. There's a mission on 5th Street. They'll give you a cot and some soup." "I'm not homeless," Marcus said, his voice still calm, still dignified. "I'm going to see my daughter. She's a nurse at Mercy General. Sunday dinner. We do it every week." "Sure you are." Brad's laugh was ugly. "And I'm the president. Move it." That's when the bus driver, a middle-aged woman named Rita, who'd been watching in her mirror, finally spoke up. "Brad, that's enough." He paid. "I saw him." Brad whipped around. "Stay out of this, Rita. This is a security matter. Look at him. He's clearly." "Clearly what?" The voice came from the back. A young black woman in scrubs stood up. "Clearly black? Clearly old? Clearly not dressed like you think he should be." Other voices joined in. "Leave him alone. He didn't do anything. This is discrimination." Brad's face reddened. He hated being challenged, hated being questioned. He'd taken this job because it gave him authority, a uniform, a title. People were supposed to respect that. Fear it, even. "All of you need to mind your business," he snapped. "This man fits the profile of." Profile. The woman in scrubs moved closer. The profile of what, exactly? Brad's hand went to his radio. "I'm calling this in. Disorderly conduct. Refusing to comply. Suspicious person." Marcus closed his eyes. Not again. Not after everything. Not after Korea. After Vietnam as an advisor. After decades of wearing his country's uniform and carrying its flag into places that didn't want either. He'd been called many things in his 73 years. Boy, when he was already a man. Troublemaker, when he demanded to be served at lunch counters. Sir, but only after they saw the uniform, the ribbons, the proof that he'd earned what should have been his birthright. But suspicious? On a bus? On his way to see his daughter? Something inside him, something he'd kept carefully controlled since his discharge in 1975, began to stir. "Son," Marcus said, opening his eyes. The word came out gentle but firm, the way a drill sergeant might speak to a recruit who didn't yet know better. "I'm going to need you to take your hand off me now." "Or what?" Brad squeezed harder. "You'll do what exactly, Gramps?" That's when a teenage boy in the seat across the aisle stood up. He was maybe 16, wearing a hoodie and basketball shorts, his phone in his hand. "Hey, yo, I'm recording this. Everyone is. You're all over social media right now, bro." Brad's eyes darted to the phones, pointed at him. At least a dozen passengers were filming. His grip loosened slightly. "I'm just doing my job," he said defensively. "Keeping the bus safe. You should be thanking me." "For what?" Rita, the bus driver, had turned fully in her seat now. "For harassing an elderly passenger? For assuming he's homeless because his jacket has patches? My grandfather wore his clothes until they fell apart too, because he grew up in the Depression and never forgot what it meant to go without." Brad's mouth opened and closed. He was losing control of the situation, could feel it slipping away. "I want to see your supervisor," Marcus said. His voice hadn't risen once. Hadn't needed to. Your badge number is 3847. I'm noting the time as 3:47 p.m. This bus is Route 42, heading eastbound. The driver is Rita Alvarez. I can see her name on the license posted. And there are approximately 23 witnesses present. Brad stared at him. How did you? Details matter, son. I learned that a long time ago. The medals still lay on the floor between them, catching the light, demanding to be noticed. But Brad was too proud, too defensive, too wrapped up in his own authority to look down. You know what? He said, his voice tight. Fine. Stay on the bus. But I'm reporting this. And trust me, old man, nobody's going to believe your word over mine. He turned to walk away, stepping directly on the photograph that had fallen from Marcus's bag. The plastic sleeve cracked under his boot. Marcus's eyes flicked to the photo, a young man in dress blues, arms around a woman in white, both of them grinning at a future they couldn't yet see. A future that included a baby girl who would grow up to be a nurse, who would wait every Sunday for her father to arrive for dinner. You might want to watch where you're stepping, Marcus said quietly. But Brad was already moving toward the back of the bus, his radio in hand, his report already forming in his mind. Loitering, suspicious behavior, refused to show proof of payment, hostile demeanor. The lies came easily because he'd never learned to see people. Only problems. The bus lurched forward. Rita had decided to keep moving rather than let this escalate further. She caught Marcus's eye in the mirror and nodded slightly. An apology, a promise that she'd file her own report. Marcus slowly bent down to gather his belongings. His knees protested, old injuries from jumping out of too many helicopters, from carrying too many wounded men across too much unforgiving terrain. The woman in scrubs knelt to help him. Thank you, she said softly, for keeping your cool. I know that wasn't easy. Had a lot of practice, Marcus replied. His fingers touched the metal, and he paused. The Bronze Star looked up at him, its ribbon faded, but the metal still proud. For valor, it read. He picked it up gently, the way you'd pick up something holy. Because it was not the medal itself. He never cared much about the decoration, but what it represented, who it represented. Every man who didn't come home. Every promise made in blood and kept in silence. Every moment of standing firm when everything in him wanted to run. He placed it carefully back in his bag, then picked up the photograph. The crack in the plastic ran right through his younger self's smile, but the image was still visible, still real. The young woman helped him back to his seat. Others on the bus were still murmuring, still filming, still shaking their heads at what they'd witnessed. Brad stood in the back, his radio silent. He hadn't made the call yet. Something was stopping him. Maybe the phones, maybe Rita's expression, maybe the way every single person on the bus was looking at him now. Not with fear, with disgust. The bus rolled on through the city, carrying its passengers toward their destinations, toward their dinners and their families and their ordinary Sunday evening plans. But nothing about this ride was ordinary anymore, because in 17 blocks at the Mercy General stop, something was going to happen that would change everything. The security guard just didn't know it yet. The bus swayed through traffic, and Brad Mitchell stood at the back, his thumb hovering over his radio. He could still call in, still make this official. The old man had disrespected him and challenged his authority. That couldn't stand. Around him, passengers whispered. He heard fragments. Can't believe. Disgusting. My grandfather. The words stung like gnats, small but persistent. Brad had grown up in a house where authority meant everything. His father had been military, Marines, strict by the book. Respect wasn't asked for. It was demanded. Earned through hierarchy, through rank, through power. His father had also taught him shortcuts. How to spot troublemakers. How certain people were more likely to cause problems. How you had to be tough, had to establish dominance early, or they'd walk all over you. Brad had never questioned it. Never thought to. He looked at Marcus again, really looked this time. The old man sat quietly, his bag now secured on his lap, his hands resting on top of it. There was something about his posture. Military straight, shoulders back despite his age. Brad shook off the observation. Probably just a coincidence. His radio crackled. Unit 47, What's your status? His supervisor. Brad's finger tightened on the transmit button. This is 47, he started. I've got a situation on Route 42 eastbound. Passenger became hostile when asked for proof of. Brad. Rita's voice cut through on the bus's intercom. She rarely used it and preferred to handle things quietly. But now her voice filled the entire vehicle. Before you finish that report, you should know that I'm forwarding the security footage from this bus directly to the transit authority. Every word, every action, all of it. Brad's face went white. You can't. I can and I will. I've been driving this route for 12 years. Never filed a complaint against security before. Congratulations, you're my first. The passengers erupted in quiet applause. Brad's hand dropped from the radio. His mind raced. Footage, witnesses, social media. This could cost him his job. His father would be furious. All because of one old man who couldn't just move when told. Forget it, he muttered into the radio. False alarm. Situation resolved. His supervisor's voice came back skeptical. Are you sure about that? Yeah, all clear. Brad shoved the radio back in his belt and slumped against the back wall. Fine. Let the old man ride wherever. Brad would just avoid him, stay out of sight, count down the minutes until his shift ended. But the teenager across from Marcus wasn't done. Hey, security dude, the kid called out. You know you're trending right now? My video already has like 3,000 views. Brad's stomach dropped. The kid turned his phone around, showing the screen. Sure enough, the video was racking up shares, comments flooding in. This is heartbreaking. That man deserves respect. Badge number 3847. Everyone needs to see this. What's wrong with people? Brad felt the walls closing in. This was spiraling. He needed to fix it, needed to take back control. Look, he said, moving toward Marcus. The passengers were tense. I may have overreacted. It's been a long day. Lots of incidents lately. I'm just trying to keep everyone safe. Marcus looked up at him. Those eyes, they'd seen things. Brad could tell now. There was a weight in them, a history. Safe from what? Marcus asked. From a man going to see his daughter? I didn't know that. You didn't ask. The simple truth of it hit harder than any accusation. Brad opened his mouth, but no words came. The woman in scrubs spoke up again. My name is Patricia. I'm a nurse at Mercy General, same as Mr. Webb's daughter. I've been taking this bus for 6 years. You know how many times I've been questioned? Never. Not once. I wonder why that is. Brad's face flushed. It's not about, I don't see, color. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what this was about. You saw an elderly black man in worn clothes and made an assumption. Didn't even check with Rita. Just went straight to intimidation. That's not fair, Brad protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Fair. An elderly white man in a business suit stood up. Brad recognized him. He rode this route weekly. Young man, I've been watching people like you my whole life. I grew up in Alabama in the 50s. I saw what happened when people with a little bit of power decided who belonged and who didn't. I thought we'd move past that. This is different. Is it? The businessman gestured to Marcus. Look at him. Really look. He's sitting quietly, bothering no one. His fare was paid, but you saw something that made you react. What was it? His age? His clothes? Or is it something else you don't want to say out loud? Brad felt surrounded. Every face turned toward him, waiting. I was just doing my job, he repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to him. No, Marcus said softly. You were doing what you thought your job was. There's a difference. The bus pulled up to a red light. Through the window, Brad could see a billboard advertising Military Appreciation Month. A soldier in dress uniform, the caption reading, Honor those who served. Something nagged at the edge of his mind. The way Marcus had stood, the precision of his observations, badge number, time, route witnesses. That wasn't the behavior of someone unfamiliar with authority. That was training. Were you in the service? Brad heard himself ask. Marcus's expression didn't change. Why do you ask? Just the way you handled yourself. Very controlled. I've had practice keeping my composure in difficult situations. It wasn't an answer. Not really. But before Brad could press further, a commotion erupted near the front of the bus. A young mother struggling with a stroller. The wheel had caught in the door mechanism, and her baby was starting to cry. The woman looked exhausted, overwhelmed. Marcus rose immediately. Despite his age, despite what had just happened, he moved to help without hesitation. "Here," he said gently. "Let me see if I can." His hands, scarred, weathered hands that trembled slightly, worked the stroller free with surprising deftness. The wheel popped loose, and the baby, sensing the tension had passed, quieted. "Thank you so much," the mother breathed. "I didn't think it would. I was worried I'd have to." "No trouble at all, ma'am." Marcus smiled at the baby, who grabbed his finger with tiny fists. "You've got a strong grip there, little one. Fighter's spirit." Brad watched the interaction, feeling something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Shame? Guilt? He wasn't sure. He'd never been good at identifying emotions beyond anger and pride. The bus started moving again. 3 more stops until Mercy General. Brad's phone buzzed. A text from a coworker who'd seen the video. "Dude, you're all over Twitter." Supervisors asking questions. What happened? He didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, he found himself watching Marcus, who had returned to his seat and was now staring out the window at the passing city. The old man's reflection in the glass looked tired. Sad, but not defeated. Never defeated. "Mr. Webb," Brad said, the name feeling strange on his tongue. He'd been calling him old man and Gramps in his head for so long, he'd forgotten there was an actual person behind the label. "I owe you an apology." The bus went quiet. Everyone listened. Marcus turned from the window. Waited. Brad struggled. Apologies didn't come easily. His father had taught him that apologizing was weakness, an admission of failure. "I made assumptions about you, based on things that don't matter. I was wrong." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "You were." Brad waited for more, for yelling, for demands, for the lecture he probably deserved. But Marcus just returned his gaze to the window. That somehow felt worse. The teenager spoke up again. "Man, that was weak. You basically just said, 'Sorry, I judged you by your appearance,' without saying what you judged. We all know what you thought." "I didn't." "You did." Patricia cut in. "And here's what really gets me. You have power in this job. Real power over real people. And you used it to hurt someone who was doing nothing wrong. Do you even understand what that feels like? To just exist and have someone decide your problem?" Brad's throat tightened. "No, I don't." "Exactly," she said. "And that's the problem." The bus rolled past a veterans memorial, a park with stone markers listing names of the dead from every American war. Marcus's eyes tracked it as they passed, lingering on the section marked Korea 1950 to 1953. His hand moved unconsciously to his bag, touching the spot where the medal rested. Brad saw the gesture, saw where Marcus had been looking. "Sir," he said, his voice different now, quieter, almost afraid of the answer. "That medal that fell from your bag, what was it for?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. "For doing what needed to be done when it needed doing." "Were you?" "Yes." One word, but it contained multitudes. The bus made another stop. Passengers got off, new ones got on. The space was refilled with people carrying groceries, briefcases, gym bags. Normal life, normal routine. But nothing felt normal anymore. 2 blocks from Mercy General, Rita's voice came over the intercom again. "Mr. Webb, we're almost at your stop." Marcus stood, gathering his bag carefully. The young mother with the baby smiled at him. Patricia gave him a nod of respect. The businessman saluted, a gesture that seemed to surprise even himself. And Brad Mitchell, 28-year-old security guard with a freshly pressed uniform and the overinflated sense of authority, stood frozen in the back of the bus, finally understanding what he'd done. Finally seeing who he'd done it to. The bus pulled up to Mercy General. Through the wide glass doors, a woman in scrubs could be seen checking her watch, looking out anxiously. Waiting. Marcus moved toward the exit. He passed Brad without a glance, as if the security guard had ceased to exist entirely. But as he reached the door, something made him stop. He turned back. "Son," Marcus said, and Brad's father's ghost rose up in that word. "You'll have a lot of years to regret today if you don't learn from it. Don't waste them." Then he stepped off the bus. Brad rushed to the door, suddenly desperate. "Wait, sir, Mr. Webb." But Marcus was already gone, walking toward the hospital entrance where his daughter had spotted him and was running out, her face lit with joy and relief. Brad watched them embrace, watched the daughter pull back to look at her father with concern, probably seeing the exhaustion in his face, the tension in his shoulders. I watched Marcus shake his head, smile, and say something that made her laugh. Normal. After everything, he was just a father meeting his daughter for Sunday dinner. And Brad had tried to take that away from him. "You should go after him," Rita said. She'd stepped out of her driver's seat and was standing in the aisle. "While you still can, before they walk inside." "I don't. What would I say?" "The truth." Rita's eyes were hard. "That you were wrong. That you're sorry. That you'll do better. And mean it this time." Brad's hand went to the door release. But fear stopped him. Fear of facing what he'd done. Fear of his supervisor finding out. Fear of his father's disappointment. Fear of changing. It was easier to stay on the bus, to let this moment pass, to tell himself it wasn't that bad, that he'd already apologized, that people were making too big a deal out of this. His finger moved toward the radio again. Maybe he could still control the narrative. File a report that made him look better. Explain that the old man had been suspicious, that procedures were followed, that everything was justified. The lies were always there, ready to be told. But then he saw it. On the ground, where Marcus had stood, something small and metallic caught the light. The metal. It must have fallen when Marcus gathered his bag. Now it lay on the dirty bus floor, forgotten. Brad bent and picked it up. The bronze star was heavier than he expected, the ribbon worn soft with age. He turned it over in his palm, and on the back he saw an engraving. Corporal Marcus T. Webb, 22nd Infantry Regiment, Korea, 1951. Greater love hath no man. The bus seemed to tilt beneath Brad's feet. That made Marcus, 17? 18 when he'd enlisted? About Brad's age when he joined the Transit Authority. But Marcus had gone to war. I had earned this. Had done something that required valor. And today, Brad had shoved him, mocked him, tried to throw him off a bus. Through the window, he could see Marcus and his daughter walking toward the hospital entrance. They'd pause in seconds, reach the door, go inside. The moment would be lost. Brad's legs moved before his mind caught up. He hit the door release and bolted off the bus. "Mr. Webb," he shouted. "Sir, wait." Marcus turned at the hospital entrance, his daughter's arm linked through his. Her expression shifted from confusion to something harder when she recognized the security guard running toward them. "Dad, is that the man who—" "Yes." Marcus's voice was calm, but his hand tightened slightly on her arm. "It's all right, Sharon." Brad skidded to a stop a few feet away, breathing hard. The metal was clutched in his fist, catching the late afternoon sun. "You dropped this," Brad said, holding it out. Marcus looked at the metal, then at Brad. "He didn't reach for it." "I did. On the bus. I found it after you." Brad swallowed. "After I drove you away." Sharon stepped forward, her nurse's instincts overriding her anger. "That's his bronze star. Do you have any idea what—" "Sharon." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. The same tone he'd used on the bus. The same tone that carried authority without demanding it. Let the young man speak. Brad felt tears threatening. Actual tears, something he hadn't experienced since childhood. His father had taught him that real men didn't cry. Real men were strong, in control, dominant. But right now, holding this piece of metal that represented more courage than Brad would ever possess, he felt like a child. Small and ashamed and desperately wanting to be better than he was. "I didn't know," he said, his voice cracking. "About your service. About what you'd done. I saw an old man in worn clothes, and I just assumed. And if I hadn't served?" Marcus asked quietly. "If I hadn't earned this medal? If I was just an old man trying to see his daughter? Would that have mattered?" The question hung in the air between them. Brad had no answer. Because they both knew the truth, he'd been ready to throw Marcus off that bus regardless. The uniform, the service, the sacrifice, none of it would have changed Brad's first instinct. He'd seen someone he deemed less than, and he'd acted on it. "No," Brad admitted, the word barely a whisper. "It wouldn't have. I would have treated you the same." Marcus nodded slowly. "At least you're being honest now." Sharon was still watching Brad with hard eyes. "Do you know what year my father enlisted?" 1950. He was 17, lied about his age to get in. You want to know why? Brad shook his head, but she continued anyway. Because his older brother had joined the year before, and his brother had written home about how black soldiers were still being segregated, still being called boys and worse by white officers, still being given the most dangerous assignments with the least recognition. My dad enlisted because he couldn't let his brother face that alone. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. His brother died at Chosin Reservoir, froze to death in a foxhole while waiting for reinforcements that came too late. My father carried his body 3 miles through enemy territory to get him home for burial. That's what this medal represents. Not just courage, survival, refusal to give up, determination to honor those who didn't make it back. Brad felt like he'd been punched. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't know. Marcus finished for him. But here's what you need to understand, son. I shouldn't have to prove my worth with a medal. My daughter shouldn't have to recite my service record to make you treat me with basic human respect. I should have that because I'm a person, because I paid my fare, because I was doing nothing wrong. You're right. You're absolutely right. Tell me something, Marcus said. Why did you become a security guard? The question caught Brad off balance. My father was in the military. Marines. He wanted me to enlist, but I didn't want to deploy, didn't want combat. So I took this job instead. Thought it was a way to serve without risking as much. Marcus's expression shifted, not to anger, but something sadder. Understanding maybe your father was disappointed? Yeah, said security work was for people who couldn't handle real duty. That I was taking the easy way. And you believed him? Brad's throat tightened. Every day. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and took the medal from Brad's hand. But instead of putting it away, he held it up between them. You see this? I was scared every single day in Korea. Terrified. I was 18 years old, freezing, watching friends die, wondering if I'd make it home. And you know what? There were times I wished I'd taken an easier path. I wish I'd chosen something safer. I wish I hadn't been so eager to prove myself. He lowered the medal. Courage isn't the absence of fear, son. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid, even when you're unsure, even when every instinct tells you to run or hide or blame someone else. I don't know if I have that kind of courage. You're here now, aren't you? Marcus gestured to the medal in his own hand. You could have kept this, could have stayed on that bus, could have let this moment pass and told yourself it didn't matter. But you're here, apologizing, admitting fault. That takes a different kind of courage. Brad looked down at his hands. They were shaking. I need to tell you something, he said, about what almost happened. After you left the bus, I was going to file a false report. Make you look like the problem. Protect myself. Sharon inhaled sharply. Marcus just nodded, unsurprised. But you didn't, Marcus said. Only because Rita said she had footage. And passengers were recording. If they hadn't been, Brad forced himself to meet Marcus's eyes. I would have lied. I would have ruined your day. Maybe more, to save myself. That's who I am. That's who I've been. The admission hung heavy in the air. Who you've been, Marcus repeated. Not who you have to be. How do I change? How do I stop being? You start by seeing people, Marcus interrupted. Really seeing them. Not as problems or profiles or threats. As human beings with their own stories, their own struggles, their own worth. He gestured to the hospital behind him. My daughter sees people every day. Sick people, scared people, dying people. She doesn't get to choose which ones to help based on how they look or where they're from. She sees pain, and she responds with care. That's the job. That's the calling. But I'm not a nurse. You're a person with power over other people, Sharon cut in. That's the same responsibility, just different context. And if you can't handle it with compassion, you shouldn't have that power at all. The truth of it cut deep. Brad pulled out his phone. His hand shook as he opened his recording app. What are you doing? Sharon asked. Making a statement. An official one. Brad hit a record and took a breath. My name is Brad Mitchell, badge number 3847, Transit Security. On Sunday, November 8th, 2025, at approximately 3:47 p.m. on Route 42 eastbound, I engaged in discriminatory conduct against passenger Marcus Webb. I made assumptions based on his appearance and age. I physically attempted to remove him from the bus, despite his fare being paid. I was wrong. This was not proper procedure. This was prejudice, plain and simple. He paused, looking at Marcus. Mr. Webb is a veteran who served in Korea, but he shouldn't need to be a veteran to be treated with respect. He shouldn't need a medal to be seen as worthy. He deserved better from me. Every passenger deserves better. Brad stopped the recording and looked at his phone. I'm going to send this to my supervisor, to Transit Authority. Probably cost me my job, but he met Marcus's eyes. That's what doing the right thing looks like, isn't it? Even when you're afraid. Marcus extended his hand. After a moment, Brad took it. The old man's grip was strong, weathered real. The handshake of someone who'd held rifles and carried wounded and built a life from nothing but determination. Your father was wrong, Marcus said. Serving isn't just about combat. It's about choosing every day to do what's right over what's easy. That's the real test. I'm going to try, Brad said. To be better, to see better. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I'm going to try. That's all any of us can do. Sharon checked her watch. Dad, we should head in. Your granddaughter's waiting. She made dessert. Granddaughter? Brad felt another wave of shame. He tried to deny this man dinner with his family. Sunday dinner. Maybe the one thing Marcus looked forward all week. For years old, Marcus said with visible pride. Smart as a whip. I want to be a doctor like her mama. She should meet you in your uniform, Sharon said to her father. I keep telling you, bring the photos. She'd love to hear the stories. Maybe next time. Marcus's expression clouded slightly. Some stories are hard to tell to someone so young. They turned to go, but Brad called out one more time. Sir? One last thing. Marcus paused. Thank you for your service. But more than that, thank you for today, for giving me a chance to be better. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Marcus smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. Everyone deserves a chance to be better, son. That's the promise this country made. Not that we'd be perfect, but that we'd keep trying. That we'd learn. That we'd grow. He tapped the metal still in his hand. That's what I fought for. Not just for the ones who came home, but for the ones who'd come after. For a world where people like you could realize their mistakes and choose to change. Don't waste that chance. With that, Marcus and Sharon disappeared through the hospital doors. Brad stood alone in the fading afternoon light, watching the place where they'd vanished. On the street, the Route 42 bus pulled away, moving on to its next stop, its next passengers, its next ordinary moments in the flow of city life. But Brad knew nothing would be ordinary for him anymore. He looked down at his phone, at the recording he'd made. His thumb hovered over the send button. This was it, the moment of real courage Marcus had talked about. The choice to do right even when afraid. Brad pressed send. Then he sat down on the hospital steps, removed his security badge, and held it in his hand. It felt lighter than Marcus's medal. Cheaper, less earned. He thought about his father, about all the lessons learned and unlearned, about the man he'd been and the man he might become. The phone in his pocket buzzed, probably his supervisor, probably angry. Brad would deal with it, would face whatever came, because that's what courage looked like. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Not the power of a badge, but the strength to admit when that power was misused. Not the right to judge, but the wisdom to see. For the first time in a long time, Brad Mitchell felt like he could breathe. 3 weeks later, Brad Mitchell sat in a different uniform. Or rather, no uniform at all. Just jeans and a t-shirt as he waited in the lobby of the Veterans Community Center on Elm Street. He'd been fired as expected. The Transit Authority had launched a full investigation. The video had gone viral. Over 2 million views, and public pressure had been intense. Brad's name had been dragged through social media, his face recognizable on the street. Some called it justice. Others called it to cancel culture gone too far. Brad called it accountability. He'd spent the weeks since that Sunday attending sensitivity training he'd paid for himself. Reading books he should have read years ago. Listening to voices he'd been taught to ignore. Learning to sit with discomfort instead of defending against it. And he'd been coming here to this center volunteering, serving food, organizing donation drives, listening to stories, learning to see people. Brad A woman's voice. He looked up to find Sharon Webb, Marcus's daughter, standing in scrubs. She. Retry. IW. Continue. Must have just finished a shift at the hospital. Sharon. Hi. Brad stood, suddenly nervous. I didn't know you volunteered here too. Every other Thursday. Dad used to come with me before his hips started acting up. She studied him for a moment. I heard you were volunteering. I wasn't sure I believed it. I understand why you doubt it. An awkward silence stretched between them. Then Sharon gestured to the cafeteria. Walk with me? I need coffee before I head home. They walked through the center's hallways, past photos of veterans from every era. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Faces young and old, every shade of American. How's your father? Brad asked. Good. His daughter feeds him too much on Sundays. A slight smile. He asks about you sometimes. Brad stopped walking. He does. Don't look so surprised. Dad doesn't hold grudges. Says life's too short, and he's seen too much real evil to waste energy on mistakes people are trying to fix. They reached the cafeteria. Sharon poured 2 coffees without asking if Brad wanted one, then sat at a corner table. Brad joined her. I owe you an apology too, Brad said. Not just your father. You had to witness that. Had to worry about him. Had to deal with the aftermath. Yes, I did. Sharon didn't soften it. Do you know what it's like? Spending every day hoping your elderly parent makes it safely from point A to point B, knowing that at any moment, someone might decide he's suspicious or dangerous just because of how he looks. I can't imagine. No, you can't. Because nobody looks at you and sees a threat before you've even opened your mouth. She sipped her coffee. But you're here, doing the work. That count for something. Does it? I mean, really? I could volunteer all I want, but I still made those assumptions. I still have those instincts. What if I hadn't found the medal? What if there'd been no witnesses? I could have his voice cracked. I could have hurt him. If he'd resisted more, if he'd been younger and pushed back, it could have escalated. But it didn't. Only because of circumstances I didn't create. Sharon set down her coffee and leaned forward. You want to know what my father said that night at dinner? After everything. Brad nodded, almost afraid to hear it. He said, that young man is lost, but he's not gone. There's a difference. Sharon's eyes were intense. Dad's seen real monsters, Brad. Men who enjoyed cruelty, who killed without remorse, who believed some people were less than human and acted on it with pride. He said you're not that. You're just someone who never learned to question what you were taught. I should have questioned it. Yes, but most people don't. They just coast through life on autopilot, never examining their assumptions until something forces them to. You got forced. The question is, what are you going to do now? Brad looked around the center. Veterans in wheelchairs. Old men with missing limbs. Women with invisible scars. All of them had served. All of them had sacrificed. I don't know yet, he admitted. I'm trying to figure that out. Well, while you're figuring it out, Sharon pulled something from her bag. A flyer. We're doing a fundraiser next month. Collecting winter coats for homeless veterans. We need volunteers to sort donations, coordinate distribution. Interested? Brad took the flyer. You wanted to help with that? I'm not asking because I forgive you. That's not mine to give. I'm asking because the work needs doing and you're here offering your time. Veterans are going to be cold this winter, whether you and I have resolved our feelings or not. The pragmatism of it struck Brad. This wasn't about redemption or forgiveness or feeling better about himself. It was about recognizing that there was work to do and choosing to do it. I'll be there, he said. Sharon nodded and stood. Good. Bring work gloves. Some of the donations come in pretty rough shape. She paused at the door. And Brad? My father's birthday is in December. If you're serious about this, about learning, about changing, you should come to the celebration we're having here. Meet some of his friends from the war. Hear their stories. Not as punishment, but as education. I'd be honored. If you're sure. I'm sure. Dad specifically asked me to invite you. After Sharon left, Brad sat alone with his coffee, staring at the flyer. Around him, the center buzzed with activity. Veterans playing chess. A support group meeting in the corner. Someone teaching a young vet how to navigate VA benefits paperwork. Life. Community. People helping people. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Dad's asking about the job situation again. What should I tell him? Brad stared at the message. His father hadn't spoken to him directly since the firing, hadn't returned his calls. The disappointment was a living thing, heavy and familiar. He typed back, "Tell him I'm figuring things out, and that I'm okay." It wasn't the answer his father wanted. Brad wasn't enrolled in a police academy or private security or anything that would restore the pride his father had lost when his son became that guy from the video. But it was the truth. He was figuring things out, and for the first time, he was okay with not having all the answers. December came cold and bitter. The coat drive exceeded expectations. Over 300 coats collected, sorted, and distributed to veterans who might otherwise have frozen in doorways and under bridges. Brad worked every weekend, his hands raw from sorting through musty donations, his back aching from lifting boxes. It felt good, real. On Marcus Webb's 74th birthday, Brad arrived at the Veterans Center carrying a gift he'd spent weeks agonizing over. Not flowers or wine or anything performative. Instead, he found a book, a historical account of the 22nd Infantry Regiment's service in Korea, published by a military historian with extensive interviews from soldiers who'd served. Marcus sat in the center's main hall, surrounded by old friends who'd also served. Men in their 70s and 80s, some with walkers, some with oxygen tanks, all with stories etched into their faces. Brad. Marcus smiled when he saw him. "You came. Wouldn't miss it, sir." "None of that, sir, business. It's Marcus." The old man gestured to an empty chair. "Sit. Meet the men who kept me alive when I was too young and stupid to know better." For the next 3 hours, Brad listened. He heard about the frozen chosen, where temperatures dropped to 40 below and frostbite claimed as many men as bullets. He heard about integrated units, black and white soldiers fighting side by side because survival demanded unity even when society demanded separation. He heard about the men who didn't come home. A veteran named James, who'd served with Marcus, leaned forward at one point. "You know what I remember most? Not the combat, not the fear, but coming home, standing in that uniform at a bus station in Alabama, and the driver telling me I had to sit in the back. I just spent 2 years fighting for this country, but I still wasn't good enough to sit where I pleased." The bitterness in his voice was old, but not faded. "Did you?" Brad asked quietly. "Sit in the back." "Hell no." James grinned. "Sat right up front." The driver called the cops. Got arrested. Spent the night in jail. "And I'd do it again." Another veteran, Luis, chimed in. "My first week back, I got refused service at a restaurant. Uniform and all. The owner said, 'We don't serve your kind.' I've been eating sea rations in a foxhole 6 weeks earlier." Brad felt his throat tighten. How did you keep serving?" "Knowing that," Marcus answered, "because the country we believed in wasn't the country we lived in yet. We fought for the promise, not the reality. For the idea that things could be better, should be better." "And are they?" Brad asked. "Better." The room fell quiet. "Some ways, yes," Marcus finally said. "Some ways, no. Progress isn't a straight line, son. It's a struggle. Every generation has to choose. Are we moving forward or sliding back?" James nodded. "You're part of that choice now. What happened on that bus? That could have been another story about nothing changing. But it wasn't. You're here, learning. That matters. Does it change what I did?" "No," Louise said bluntly. "But it changes what you'll do next. That's the only thing any of us can control. What comes next?" Later, as the party wound down, Marcus pulled Brad aside. They walked to the center's memorial wall, a display of photos and dog tags from veterans who'd passed away. "See this man?" Marcus pointed to a photo of a young black soldier, barely 20. "Private Aaron Webb. My brother. He believed in something bigger than himself, even when the world told him he didn't matter. Even when his own country treated him like less than." Brad studied the photo. The resemblance to Marcus was striking. Same eyes, same set to the jaw. "I think about him every day," Marcus continued. "About whether the life I've lived honored his sacrifice. Whether the world we've built is the one he died believing in. Is it? Getting there. Slowly. People like my daughter. She heals everyone who comes through her hospital doors. Doesn't matter their color or their politics or their past. That's progress. People like you, choosing to learn instead of defending. That's progress too. Marcus turned to face Brad directly. You asked me once how to change. Here's what I've learned in 74 years. Change isn't a destination. It's a practice. Every day, you wake up and choose. Choose to see people. Choose to question your assumptions. Choose to act with kindness, even when fear tells you to act with force. What if I mess up again? You will. We all do. The question is, will you have the courage to admit it and keep trying? Brad thought about his father, about the lessons he'd learned, about the man he'd been raised to be versus the man he wanted to become. I don't think my father would understand that kind of courage. Maybe not, but you do, and that's what matters. They stood in silence for a moment, two men from different generations, different experiences, different worlds, connected by a single moment of truth on a crosstown bus. Thank you, Brad said finally, for the medal, for the lesson, for this. He gestured to the room, full of veterans, for showing me what service actually means. Marcus smiled. Thank you for being brave enough to listen. 6 months later, Brad Mitchell walked into his first day at a new job. Not security. He'd left that behind. Instead, he'd been hired as an outreach coordinator for the city's Department of Veteran Affairs, working to connect homeless vets with housing and services. The pay was less than transit security. The hours were harder. The work was often heartbreaking. But it mattered. His father still wasn't speaking to him. Maybe he never would. That was a grief Brad was learning to carry. The understanding that sometimes growth meant disappointing the people who raised you. But his mother had called last week. Your father saw the article, she'd said quietly. The local paper had done a piece on the veteran outreach program, featuring Brad's work. He didn't say anything, but he cut out. I saw it on his desk. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. On his lunch break, Brad took the Route 42 bus across town. Rita was still driving. She waved when he boarded. Other passengers glanced at him, a few with recognition. The video still circulated occasionally, resurfacing whenever someone wanted to discuss discrimination or accountability. Brad had learned to live with being a cautionary tale. If his mistake could teach someone else, then maybe it had purpose. He rode to Mercy General and got off at Marcus's stop. Not to see Marcus. He didn't want to intrude. Just to stand where he'd stood, to remember where he'd been and how far he'd come. The hospital doors slid open and Sharon walked out, finishing a shift. She saw Brad and approached. Stuck in my father's bus stop now. Just thinking. Sharon studied him. 6 months of volunteer work had changed his face. He looked older, more tired, but also more settled, more real. Dad's having dinner at our place tonight, she said. Nothing fancy, just family. But there's always room for one more if you're free. Brad's eyes widened. I couldn't. You could. And you should. My daughter keeps asking about the man from Grandpa's story. She wants to meet you. He told her. He tells everyone. It's his favorite story now, about the young man who was brave enough to change. Sharon's expression softened. Come at 6. Bring your appetite. And Brad? Don't bring wine or flowers. Just bring yourself. That's enough. That evening, Brad sat at Marcus Webb's daughter's dinner table, surrounded by 3 generations of family he'd once tried to exclude from a bus ride. Marcus's 4-year-old granddaughter, Maya, sat next to Brad, peppering him with questions about his work. And you help soldiers? Veterans. People who used to be soldiers. Like Grandpa. Like your grandpa. Maya looked at Marcus with pride. Grandpa's a hero. Yes, he is, Brad agreed. Marcus caught his eye across the table and smiled. No resentment. No judgment. Just recognition. One person acknowledging another's humanity. After dinner, as Brad prepared to leave, Marcus walked him to the door. You know what the real victory is? Marcus said. Not the medal. Not the recognition. But this, sitting at a table with people you once wronged, breaking bread together. That's what we fought for. That possibility. I still don't feel like I deserve. None of us deserve grace. Marcus interrupted gently. We just receive it, and then we pass it on. That's how the world gets better. One act of undeserved grace at a time. Brad stepped out into the night. The city spread before him. Millions of people with their own stories, their own struggles, their own chances for grace and growth. Somewhere, someone was making the same mistakes Brad had made, judging too quickly, seeing too little, acting from fear instead of understanding. But somewhere else, someone was choosing differently, questioning their assumptions, extending kindness to strangers, learning to see. The work was never finished. The struggle was never over. But that night, walking home through the city he served, Brad Mitchell understood something fundamental. Power without compassion is tyranny. Authority without empathy is cruelty. Uniforms without humanity are just costumes. And courage, real courage, isn't the absence of fear or mistake. It's the willingness to face what you've done wrong, to sit with the discomfort of your own prejudice, and to choose, every single day, to be better than you were. The bus that had changed his life rolled past him on the street, continuing its route through the city. Inside, passengers sat in their seats, old and young, black and white and brown, rich and poor, veteran and civilian. All of them are just trying to get home. All of them deserve to be seen. Brad watched it go, then turned toward his own home, carrying Marcus Webb's lesson like a medal earned in the only battle that really mattered. The battle to remain human in a world that constantly tempted you to be less. 2 years later, Marcus Webb sat in the front row at the Veterans Community Center's annual award ceremony. His daughter Sharon sat beside him, and his granddaughter Maya, now 6, fidgeted in her dress clothes. "Who's getting the award, Grandpa?" Maya whispered. "A friend," Marcus said. On stage, the center's director was speaking. "This year's Community Service Award goes to someone who reminds us that change is always possible, that redemption is real, that our worst moments don't have to define us if we're willing to do the work." Brad Mitchell walked onto the stage, no longer the cocky security guard in a pressed uniform. He wore a simple suit, his face lined with the good exhaustion of meaningful work. In 2 years, his outreach program had housed 43 homeless veterans and connected over 100 more with services. The audience applauded. Brad's mother was there, beaming with pride. His father wasn't, but the empty chair beside her suggested he'd been invited. Perhaps next year. Brad accepted the award, a plaque with words etched in brass, and stepped to the microphone. 2 years ago, he began, I was a different person. I had power without wisdom, authority without compassion, and I used that power to hurt someone who deserved better. He found Marcus in the audience. Marcus Webb taught me something that day. He taught me that who we are isn't fixed, that grace is real, that the hardest journey we ever take is the one from ignorance to understanding. Brad held up the plaque. This award has my name on it, but it belongs to Marcus, to every veteran who served with dignity and came home to face indignity. To everyone who's ever been judged before being seen, and to everyone who's found the courage to admit they were wrong and the strength to become right. He stepped down from the stage and walked directly to Marcus. Without a word, he handed him the plaque. Marcus looked at it, then at Brad. "This is yours." "No, sir. It's ours. Nothing I've done would exist without what you taught me, without what you gave me, a chance to be better." Marcus stood, his movements slower now, his age showing. But his eyes were clear and bright. "Then we'll share it," he said, "like we share this work, like we share this hope that tomorrow can be better than today." They shook hands, old soldiers and reformed guards, while Maya tugged on her grandfather's sleeve. "Grandpa, is that the man from the story? The one who learned to see?" "Yes, baby. That's him. Did he really not see you before?" Marcus knelt down to his granddaughter's level. "He saw me, sweetheart, but he didn't see me. He saw what he expected to see, what he'd been taught to see. It took something special for him to really look." "What made him look?" Marcus smiled. "Truth, and the courage to face it." Maya thought about this, then turned to Brad. "Thank you for learning to see my grandpa." Brad's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for sharing him with me." And in that moment, in a room full of veterans who'd fought for a country that didn't always fight for them, in the presence of a man who'd taught him what service really meant, watched by a child who represented the future they were all building together, Brad Mitchell understood the final lesson. We are all blind until we choose to see. We are all lost until we choose to find our way. We are all alone until we choose to recognize our connection. The medal Marcus Webb earned in Korea was for valor in battle. But the harder courage, the everyday courage, was this: to extend grace to those who hurt you, to believe people can change, to keep building bridges even when others build walls. That was the victory that mattered. That was the war worth winning. That was the medal we all should strive to earn, not through one moment of heroism, but through a lifetime of choosing to see the humanity in every person we meet, especially when they don't yet see ours. Power means nothing if you can't see the human in front of you. True courage isn't found in a single moment. It's practiced in the quiet choice to remain human, to admit fault, to grow beyond who we were taught to be. The hardest battles aren't fought on distant shores. They're fought in our hearts, our assumptions, our willingness to truly see one another. And that's a war we must all keep fighting, one choice at a time.